The stranger in the village. The village of Jabari was known for its peaceful people, warm sunlit fields, and the great river that flowed like a silver ribbon through the land. The villagers worked together, shared stories by the fire, and celebrated every full moon with music and dance. Among them was Zalika, a young woman whose beauty was unmatched. Her dark skin glowed like polished ebony, her eyes sparkled like the stars, and her kindness touched the hearts of many. But it was not just her beauty that made her special, it was the necklace she wore, an heirloom passed down through the women in her family. The villagers whispered that it held a powerful charm, protecting its wearer from unseen dangers. One afternoon, as the sun began to set behind the hills, a stranger arrived in Jabari. He came in style, riding a horse as black as the night, wearing a golden robe that shimmered in the fading light. His name was Damu. His face was smooth, his voice deep and soothing, and his presence commanded attention. He was unlike any man the villagers had ever seen. Zalika stood at the market square with her best friend, Nia, when Damu entered. The moment his gaze met Zalika's, he smiled, his eyes full of mystery. "Such beauty," he murmured, stepping closer. "What is your name?" Zalika blushed but answered with confidence. "I am Zalika." Damu took her hand gently. "A name as beautiful as its owner." The villagers whispered among themselves. A rich man had come to their village. His golden bracelets, the fine silk of his clothes, and his deep, mesmerizing voice left everyone in awe. But Nia was not convinced. Something about Damu did not feel right. His shadow flickered strangely, as if it was moving on its own. His footprints in the dirt disappeared the moment he walked away. And when she brushed past him, his skin felt oddly cold, like the belly of a snake. She pulled Zalika aside. "Something is wrong with that man," she whispered urgently. "I don't trust him." Zalika laughed. "Nia, you worry too much. He is kind, wealthy, and he has traveled far. Perhaps this is my chance for a better life." But Zalika is shadow. "You're imagining things," Zalika interrupted, smiling. "I think you're just jealous." Nia's heart sank. She was not jealous, she was afraid. But Zalika was already enchanted, her mind filled with dreams of fine clothes, grand feasts, and a life beyond the village. That night, as the villagers celebrated Damu's arrival with dancing and music, Nia watched in silence. She saw the way Damu looked at Zalika, not with love, but with hunger, like a hunter watching its prey. Deep in the shadows of the trees, Damu smiled to himself. He had finally found the necklace. And soon, it would be his, the forbidden marriage. The days that followed Damu's arrival were filled with excitement. The villagers admired his generosity. He gifted baskets of gold, fine cloths, and rare spices to the elders. To Zalika's family, he brought jewels, cattle, and sacks of grain. Zalika's mother, Mama Eo, remained uneasy. She saw the way Damu's eyes lingered on the necklace around her daughter's neck, how he smiled to himself when she wore it. But when she tried to speak, Zalika dismissed her worries. "Mother, why do you doubt my happiness?" Zalika asked one evening. "My child," Mama Eo said, taking Zalika's hands. "I do not trust a man who appears from nowhere, bearing riches. He speaks sweet words, but there is something hidden behind his smile. A daughter's heart is soft, but a mother's spirit knows danger." But Zalika only laughed. "You worry too much, Mama. Damu is kind and wealthy. He will give me a good life beyond the village." Seeing her daughter's stubbornness, Mama Eo sighed. She had seen this before, a young woman blinded by love, walking unknowingly into the arms of fate. A terrifying vision. On the night before the wedding, Nia had a dream that made her blood run cold. She saw the village of Jabari swallowed by shadows. A great serpent, thick as an ancient tree, coiled around the village, squeezing the life from it. Its eyes burned red, and when it opened its mouth, flames poured out. In the dream, Zalika stood in the center of the village, dressed in golden robes. The snake's tongue flicked near her face. She smiled, unaware that it was about to devour her. Nia woke with a gasp, sweat pouring down her forehead. She ran straight to Zalika's hut, pushing open the door without knocking. "Zalika, please listen to me," she begged, grabbing her friend's hands. "I had a vision. Damo is not who he claims to be. I saw him in the form of a giant serpent. You must not marry him." Zalika pulled away, frowning. "Nia, enough of this. You are ruining my happiness because you cannot have what I have. You are jealous." Nia's heart broke. "Zalika, I love you like a sister. I would never." "Then be happy for me." Zalika snapped. Realizing her friend would not listen, Nia's shoulders slumped. The warning had been given, but the heart that refuses to listen must learn from pain. A grand wedding of spirits. The wedding day arrived, and the entire village of Jabor rejoiced. Never before had they seen such wealth. Great golden canopies were raised in the village square, food overflowed on wooden tables, and musicians played loud, joyous tunes. Damo's guests arrived in large numbers, men dressed in fine robes, women covered in jewels. They did not speak much, only smiled with strange, unblinking eyes. If the villagers had looked closely, they would have noticed something odd. These guests cast no shadows, and their feet left no footprints in the dust. But blinded by celebration, no one noticed. Zalika stood radiant in golden silk, her skin glowing in the sun, her necklace shimmering around her neck. Damo smiled at her, but behind his smile, there was hunger. By sunset, the ceremony was complete. Zalika was now Damo's wife. The mansion in the forest. That evening, Damo took Zalika away from the village. The people of Jabari waved happily as she climbed into a grand carriage pulled by 2 black horses. The road to Damo's home was long. The deeper they traveled into the forest, the darker the air became. The trees twisted into strange shapes, their branches curling like fingers. At last, they arrived. Zalika gasped. Before her stood a grand mansion, but something was wrong. The walls were covered in carved snake idols, their mouths open as if hissing. Inside, the floors gleamed black like wet stone, and the walls flickered with torches that burned with green flames. Damo turned to her with a smile. "This is your new home, my love." But for the first time, Zalika felt a chill run down her spine. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. The mansion of secrets. At first, Zalika tried to silence the unease growing in her heart. She had dreamed of a life beyond the village, a life of wealth and comfort. Damo had given her that. But at what cost? The mansion was beautiful, yet there was something wrong about it. During the day, Zalika explored the halls, but the air felt thick and heavy, as if unseen eyes watched her. She noticed strange things. The walls moved, at times, their patterns shifted like riding bodies. Whispers filled the corridors when no one was there. Servants appeared and disappeared without a sound, their faces blank and their feet never touching the ground. Zalika's heart pounded. One evening, she followed a dimly lit hallway and found a large door with a golden serpent engraved across it. Just as she reached for the handle, a voice stopped her. "You must never enter that room." She turned to see an old woman, one of the silent servants. Her eyes were dark and hollow. "Why?" Zalika asked, her voice trembling. "It is not meant for you," the old woman whispered before vanishing into thin air. Zalika stepped back, cold fear creeping into her bones. The terrifying truth. That night, sleep did not come easily. She tossed and turned, the whispers in the walls filling her ears. Then, she heard something worse. A soft, wet sound. Like skin sliding against stone. She sat up and turned toward Damu. Her breath caught in her throat. His back was turned to her. His body twisted and shook. His hands, no, his claws, tore at his own skin. She watched in horror as Damu shed his human form like a snake shedding its old flesh. Beneath his smooth skin lay something terrible, scales as black as night, eyes glowing like burning coals, a mouth filled with long, curved fangs. Zalika clamped a hand over her mouth to keep from screaming. She had married a monster. Damu turned slightly, sniffing the air. Zalika threw herself under the covers, trembling. After what felt like forever, she peeked out. Damu was gone. They attempted escape. Zalika knew she could not stay in the mansion any longer. At dawn, she tiptoed to the entrance, her heart beat loud in her ears. She pushed the door, locked. Panic clawed at her chest. She ran through the halls, looking for another way out, but every door had vanished. The mansion had sealed her inside. Then, she heard it. A low, heavy hiss. She turned. Two giant snakes, their bodies thick as tree trunks, slithered toward her. Their golden eyes burned with hunger. She stumbled backward, clutching the necklace around her neck. Suddenly, her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. The necklace protects you. Never take it off. Zalika looked down at the charm that had been passed down through generations. For the first time, she understood, this necklace was the only thing standing between her and death. But how long could it protect her, escape and betrayal? Zalika's heart pounded with fear. She had to leave the mansion. She spent the next day pretending nothing was wrong, but her mind raced with a desperate plan. She found a small opening in one of the high windows of her chamber. It was too small for her to escape, but not for a bird. She hurriedly scribbled a message on a piece of cloth, tying it to the leg of a small bird she had seen perching outside her window. Nia, help me. Damu is a serpent. I am trapped. With a whispered prayer, she released the bird. Would it find Nia? Would she come? She could only hope. The terrible truth. That night, Zalika lay awake. The air in the mansion was heavy with silence. Something was happening. Slipping out of her bed, she crept down the long corridors, following the faint glow of torchlight. The whispers she had heard before now became clear voices. She reached a grand hall, hiding behind a pillar. Damu stood before an enormous serpent, its body coiled high, its eyes glowing in the darkness. The time is near, my son, the serpent rumbled. You have found the girl. But the necklace, she must wear it when you take her life. Damu nodded. Tomorrow, when the moon is high, she will die, and I will be free of this half-form. Zalika clamped her hand over her mouth. He was going to kill her. And he needed her to wear the necklace when he did it. Her grandmother's words came back to her. The necklace protects you. Never take it off. Now she understood, it was the only thing keeping her alive. Her chest burned with rage and heartbreak. Damu had promised her love, a new life, and happiness. But it had all been a lie. She turned and ran. They chased through the forest. She made it to the front entrance. This time, the door was unlocked. She pushed it open and sprinted into the dark forest, her bare feet hitting the damp earth. Behind her, she heard it, hissing. The two giant serpent guards slithered after her, their movements swift and unnatural. The trees around her blurred as she ran faster than she had ever run before. Her lungs burned, her legs ached, but she could not stop. Then, a blinding smoke filled the air. The serpents hissed in confusion, unable to see. A hand grabbed Zalika's wrist and pulled her into a hidden path. The old woman's bargain. The woman who had saved her was unlike any Zalika had ever seen. Her skin was dark and cracked like burned wood, her hair tangled like old vines. Her eyes were black pits, ancient and unreadable. I saved you, the old woman said. But you are still in danger. Please, Zalika begged. Help me get back to my village. The old woman nodded. I will give you safe passage. But I ask for one thing in return. Zalika hesitated. What is it? The necklace, the woman said, her voice sharp with hunger. Zalika's hands flew to her throat. The necklace was the only thing keeping her safe. The old woman stretched out her hand. With this, she whispered, I can hide you from the serpents. Without it, they will find you. You have a choice, give it to me, or be haunted forever. Zalika's breath came fast. Could she trust this woman? But she had no time. Trembling, she unfastened the necklace and placed it in the old woman's hand. The woman grinned, her teeth sharp and jagged. Now, go, she said, tossing a handful of dark powder into the air. Zalika felt herself become weightless, unseen. She turned and ran into the darkness, toward the village. But something felt wrong. Her skin tingled, her breath felt heavier. She had escaped Damu. But at what cost, the curse revealed. Zalika ran through the dark forest, her heart pounding in her chest. She had escaped Damu, she was free. She was going home. But something was wrong. Her legs felt heavy, her breath came in short gasps, and a strange warmth spread through her body. She stumbled, falling to her knees. Her hands pressed against the damp earth, but they did not feel like her hands. She looked down. Her fingers had stretched, her nails hardening into small, curved claws. Panic seized her. She touched her face, it felt smooth, too smooth. Zalika crawled to a puddle, its surface reflecting the moonlight. She gasped. Her skin had begun to change. Thin scales, dark, glistening, crept up her arms. Her pupils had narrowed into slits. Terror gripped her. The necklace, had it been protecting her all along? Damu's rage. Back in the mansion, Damu roared in fury. The serpent guards cowered before him. She is gone, he hissed, his voice like thunder. A smaller snake trembled. She escaped, my lord. The old woman took her. Damu's claws dug into the stone walls, cracking them. Fools, he spat. Without the necklace, she was worthless to me. My curse cannot be lifted. He turned toward the forest, his glowing eyes full of rage. Find her, he growled. Bring her back, before it is too late. The Serpent Queen's revenge. Deep in the woods, the old woman held the necklace in her hands, smiling. Her cracked skin rippled, shifting like water. The air around her hummed with power. She lifted the necklace to her throat, fastening it around her neck. A blinding light erupted from her body. She threw back her head and laughed, a deep, echoing sound. She was no ordinary woman. She was the Serpent Queen, a powerful ruler who had been cursed and banished centuries ago. Damu had thought he was the true Serpent King. He had been wrong. As her power returned, her body grew taller, stronger, more terrifying. The wind howled through the trees as her voice boomed. The throne is mine once more. Damu's reign is over. Zalika's return. Zalika's legs felt weaker with every step. Her vision blurred, her body felt both human and inhuman. She saw the flickering light of Jabari in the distance, but she was afraid. Would they recognize her? Would they even accept her? She reached the village gates, stumbling, gasping for breath. A voice cried out. Zalika. It was near. She rushed forward, but stopped in shock. Zalika's once smooth skin was covered in patches of shimmering scales. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dark. Nia trembled, but she stepped closer. Zalika, she whispered, what happened to you? Zalika's lips trembled. She had no answer. She had escaped the mansion, but she was no longer the same. And deep in the forest, Damo was coming for her, redemption and a new life. Zalika stood at the gate of Jabari, her heart pounding. She had dreamed of this moment, returning home, safe and free. But as she stepped forward, she saw the fear in the eyes of the villagers. They did not recognize her. Her once radiant skin was now marked with serpent-like scales. Her golden brown eyes had turned to slits, shimmering in the moonlight. A murmur spread through the crowd. Who is she? She looks cursed. Zalika clutched her chest, pain filling her heart. Then, Nia ran forward. Zalika, she whispered, tears in her eyes. Zalika flinched. Nia, it's me. Nia stepped closer, reaching out a hand. I know. Then, Mama Eo pushed through the crowd. She saw her daughter, her Zalika, standing before her, changed, but still hers. My child, Mama Eo said, pulling Zalika into her arms. Zalika sobbed against her mother's shoulder. The rest of the village stood back, uncertain. Could they trust her? Was she still human? The fall of Damo. Deep in the forest, Damo ran. His mind raced, he had to find Zalika, he had to get the necklace back. But the shadows moved against him. The trees twisted, branches blocking his path. The air grew thick, suffocating. Then, he heard her voice. The Serpent Queen. Damo, she called, her voice calling like smoke. You thought yourself a king, but you were always just a pawn. Damo turned, but it was too late. She rose from the darkness, her true form revealed. A colossal serpent, black as the void, with golden eyes that burned like the sun. Your greed led you here, she hissed. Now, you shall serve me, for eternity. Damo screamed as the shadows closed in, wrapping around him like chains. Zalika's new path. Back in Jabari, the village elders summoned a healer. But after days of prayer and medicine, the truth became clear, Zalika's transformation was irreversible. She would never look the same again. At first, the villagers kept their distance. But time passed, and they began to see that she was still Zalika. Her kindness did not fade. Her wisdom only grew. She became a protector of the village, a guardian of its people. She warned young girls not to trust sweet words from strangers. She taught the children that greed and vanity could blind even the wisest of hearts. One evening, as the sun set over Jabari, Zalika sat with the village children beneath a great tree. She looked at their curious faces and smiled. Do not be blinded by riches and sweet words, she told them. The heart sees what the eyes cannot. And remember, not everything that glitters is gold. And with that, the story of Zalika, the serpent's bride, became legend. A tale passed down for generations. A tale of warning. A tale of wisdom. A tale of redemption. The end.